A warm welcome to some of the conundrums of the democracy that all of us cherish so dearly. Namaste, Vanakkam, welcome, Vande Mataram. It was when our beloved Prime Minister Sri Narendra Damodar Das Modi began to repeatedly refer to his 140 crore citizens or people that I began to reflect, wonder about something that disturbed me, something that struck as a piece of dissonance. Suddenly, the thought occurred to me that as a citizen, I have a vote. And I've heard everyone who knows anything at all about democracy saying and declaring from the rooftop that the vote in my hand is a very powerful thing. And the power of my vote is equal to the power of the vote in the hand of Adani or Ambani. So I have to believe that my right to press a button for once in 5 years is a very powerful thing. But frankly, I don't experience that power. I don't know about all of you who listen to me. When you went into the polling booths to press a button of your choice, did you really experience that your vote has any power? If it has any power, what kind of power? What quantity of power? What earthquake can it create on the Richter scale? 5.7, 6.1, 7.3? But when the Prime Minister says, Mera 140 crore abadi, my people numbering 140 crores, there is tremendous power in it. It's very interesting to reflect on this. When you hear the Prime Minister declaim from the podium, my people numbering 140 crores, there is tremendous power. His words ripple with power, or power ripples through his words. And yet, that power is constituted by the powerlessness that I as a citizen, you as citizens experience, even in relation to the power of the supposed power of the votes that we cast by pressing buttons. So what makes me wonder is, how does my insignificance as a voter, who is encouraged to go and cast his votes without fail once in 5 years, and not doing so is considered a flaw in my sense of citizenship responsibilities in a democratic context. What's the connection between my insignificance as a voter and the tremendous significance, the kind of mythological intensity of power that this very stuff imparts to the man at the top? I don't know if this has struck you as something strange. It strikes me as unbearably strange. So democracy is actually constructed out of several myths. One such myth is that my vote has some tremendous power. Now think of what happens. You cast your vote, then at the appointed time all the votes cast are counted, and then one particular party is declared to be the winner, and the party that wins the maximum number of seats to the parliament assumes office. And suppose the party that now governs is the party that you have not voted for. In the general statistics, your vote is subsumed into that total number of votes cast. when a government is formed in a democracy, on the first past the post system, a government may be formed with the support only of say 37-38% of the total votes cast, which may be only 60 to 60% of the total number of voters. Therefore, the total number of votes won by the party that is governing in relation to the total number of citizens in that country may be only about 20%. But in effect, this 20% votes of citizens, or votes cast by 20% of the citizens, becomes the sum total of the citizens. Therefore, the 80% are out, and only the 20% becomes the foundation on which the main leader of the country says, Mere 140 ki abadi, my people numbering 140 crores. Whereas in effect, only 20% of the 140 crores voted for his party or for him. And my vote happens to be not part of that. And what happens to the value or the power of my vote? Zero. So what happens really is, and this is something that nobody else will tell you, that this 5-yearly ritual of going and casting your votes, which all of us must, and I do that religiously, I'm not trying to discourage anyone, I'm only asking you, inviting you to think about some of the conundrums that we take for granted. So, the votes that we cast, presumably of tremendous power, power to set up governments, power to punish a party, power to bring down the mightiest of the mighty, all that democratic fictions that we are used to, it actually serves to invest a person who represents a minority with absolute power, so to speak, or near absolute power. And the fact that I did not vote for him also becomes part of his power, so that when he makes a reference to Meri 140 crore ki abadi, my people numbering 140 crores, I am also included. And I am included in my state of utter powerlessness. And the sum total of our powerlessness becomes the absolute power that he wields, which is power actually of the minority. Because he has won only a minority of the total number of votes that could have been polled, total number of citizens or eligible to vote. Say in India, it's something like 95 crores, and only 64% of that cast their votes in the last elections. Of that, the BJP won about 40%. So, how many crore of votes did the BJP poll? So, it's only 40% of the 65 crores, which is about say 30 crores out of 140 crores. But in rhetorical terms, all that is wiped out and it becomes my people numbering 140. And you and I, who did not vote for that particular party, whichever party, it doesn't matter which party, I'm not talking about party X, Y or Z, I'm talking about the general principle. And inviting you to reflect on some of the fictions that comprise our modern rhetoric. What is the power of your vote? Now, I am asking you to reflect about this in order to come to a very different point, again a point that you will never hear anyone talk about. In a democracy, my dear friends, the real strength is not your vote. Your vote has power. Your vote has value. Never belittle the power and the value of your vote. You must exercise your right to franchise without fail every time there is an opportunity to do so, and exercise that franchise without fear or favor, exercising your informed, mature understanding of the realities in the midst of which you exercise this very precious power, the power of choice. But I want to suggest to you in all humility, there is a far greater power in you that you exercise, you can exercise, you may not exercise, but you can exercise, than the power of this vote. which comes to you only once in 5 years for a fleeting second or two. You go, press the button, that's the end of it. Then you have nothing to do with how democracy is done, government is done thereafter. Thereafter, your only duty is reduced to paying taxes and enduring whatever laws passed by the government. This idea of a democracy as government of the people, by the people, for the people, it's one of the grandest of all fictions you can think of. I've reflected long and deep on these things. What is the extent of power that I can experience because I have a vote? I have a kind of a sense of fleeting euphoria once in 5 years, lasting only 3 or 4 seconds when I press the button. That's all. After that, I have nothing to do with anything. The rest of the time, I'm just sitting and enduring whatever happens. And the more the center of power at the national level becomes mighty, capable of indulging in unilateral actions without accountability, without checks and balances, the more insignificant I feel, the more marginalized I feel. It's not a question of religious minorities or minorities on the basis of language or whatever. It's a question of the plight to citizens in general that I'm talking about. So, as against this democratic fiction, I want to suggest a humanistic reality. What is that? As a citizen, you can have power. You have enormous power. And that power is not once in 5 years for a fleeting second or two. It's power that you can exude and exert continually every minute of your life. That's the power of your personality. And therefore, what all of us as citizens of this great democracy must aim at, prioritize, and do everything that we possibly can is to develop the power of our personality. And how do we actually develop the power of our personality? Well, as I said in one of my videos shared with you nearly a year ago, personality has, to put it in the most simplistic formula, personality has got 3 dimensions: thinking, feeling, willing or acting. Feeling, thinking, willing. To will is to act, right? So, if you like, feeling, thinking, acting. These are the 3. If you imagine a triangle, personality as a triangle, there is feeling, there is thinking, there is acting. That's it. Now, what has happened is that in the name of democracy, citizens have been actually disempowered in respect of all of this. Nobody cares for your feelings. In fact, you are required to adjust and fine-tune your feelings to suit the convenience of the power center at the top. You are not free to entertain any feeling which the big brother is likely to dislike. So, you have to mask your feeling. Bury your feelings 5 fathoms deep, as Shakespeare says in The Tempest, which is the last play he wrote. Full fathom 5 thy father sleeps. Full fathom 5 fathoms deeply buried. Full fathom 5 thy father sleeps. He is buried 5 fathoms underground. So, emotionally you are disempowered. Not only that, you are also required to indulge in psychophancy, which actually involves the corruption of your feelings, the distortion of your sentiments, and being dishonest about what you actually feel, which must be surrendered in favor of what you are required to feel. Second is thinking. Today it has become nearly a crime to think. Think other than thinking along the lines prescribed from a distance. Any deviation from the set line of thought is considered anti-national. And we don't realize really that this is actually disempowering us, the inability to feel sincerely, the inability to think freely. Thinking and feeling are all part of the fundamental rights Nobody has the right to invade the realm of your feeling and your thinking, because it's part of your inner life, over which no man, no constituted authority of even the mightiest and the most despotic kind has any right to trespass or touch. And yet, these things are meddled with. And of course, if you don't feel, if you don't think, then you don't act, you don't do anything. Then what happens? You're reduced to a cipher, you're reduced to a political and human zero. And it is this zero walking on two legs that goes once in 5 years into a polling booth and presses a button and comes home feeling very euphoric. Yes, I've done it. I've done it. It's actually very pathetic. But it doesn't have to be pathetic. That's the point I'm going to make, and I wish to make. What we have to do is to enrich our personality in all three dimensions. We have to enrich our feelings. And the source of all feelings is fellow feeling. Feel for others, especially for those who are in miserable situations of oppression, fear, anxiety, disempowerment, so on and so forth. The opposite of this is living to yourself a life of selfishness. Selfishness makes the fountain spring of your emotions to dry up. Therefore, the greatest danger to the development, or the major hindrance to the development of your personality, particularly in respect to its wellspring of feeling, is selfishness. Living to yourself, which reduces the scope of your life to this very small little thing called your ego. Our self must expand more and more and more, and involve more and more of the people and realities all around us. A true Indian is one whose self has grown large enough to embrace the whole of India. As was envisaged in the old pledge that we, when we were in school, were required to repeat every day, India is my country, all Indians are my brothers and sisters. How can you say that unless the scope of yourself has expanded to the extent of enclosing the whole of India within its fold? The goal is glorious, but it doesn't correspond to the reality. What does a little child in a school know about it? So when you make children repeat this kind of thing in a parrot-like fashion, you are actually making a mockery of very profound sentiments of this kind. I'm glad that this practice of making school children repeat this pledge daily has been discontinued. It was a very stupid practice, absolutely senseless. So we have to enlarge our sentiments, the scope of our sentiments. Don't shrink, but enlarge. Grow outwards. Secondly, think. Now you understand why I started this YouTube channel. This is actually an enterprise in rich, true, dynamic citizenship. If we want to be effective citizens of India, we have to become powerful personalities. And one aspect of that is surely the capacity to think. Think truly, truthfully, think profoundly, think powerfully, think radically. If you don't think, you'll become a mere dumping ground of the propaganda of other people, and the only result of that process will be that your inner life will get completely desecrated, invaded, colonized and desecrated. You'll become the mere tools of somebody else's vested interests. And then acting. Do something to translate your inner vision, the quality of your personality, into a felt reality by 1 or 2, 4 or 5 people. There's a lot you can do. I was having a conversation with one of the members of our YouTube Sangam, and I was telling her that she can constitute a very small nucleus of thinking involving people in the neighborhood. Each one of you can do it. Don't underestimate your ability to be a nucleus from which the real positive vibrations of life can spread to the neighborhood all around. And then it can spread from there, person to person to person, and ultimately engulf the whole of the nation. in a kind of redemptive embrace of good humanity and sanity. It is this power of personality that will constitute the greatest bulwark against the free run of despotism and tyranny. I tell you, with what little sense of history I have, from time immemorial, the one thing that potential despots and tyrants feared is the dignity of the people, the sense of honor of the people, the stature of the people. You cannot desecrate a person whom you respect. You cannot desecrate a person who commands respect. Will somebody try to tyrannize over Mahatma Gandhi? Impossible. Why? Because in him we sense the Mahatma. Who is a Mahatma? One who has developed his potential to the uttermost in all aspects. Mahatma Gandhi was not only highly developed in terms of his intellectual and political acumen, but he was also highly developed in terms of his feelings, his sentiments. Take, for example, his sentiments for the poor. The sentiments for that poor, half-naked woman to whose pathetic plight he could not but respond, as was so beautifully brought out by Richard Attenborough in his film Gandhi, which perhaps made Sri Narendra Modi say that the people of India did not know Gandhi at all before Richard Attenborough introduced Gandhi to the people of India in the early 80s. So, even as we continue to cast our votes with a sense of religious duty, which must not be compromised or diluted, there's a far more important, far more effective, far more powerful duty, and that is to enhance our personality, to increase our resources, to enrich our being, so that we become effective human presence wherever we are. And imagine 140 crore people, or Modi ji's pet expression, Meri 140 crore abadi. Imagine this 140 crore abadi, 140 crore people, each one of them developed in the fashion that I have so inadequately described to you. Imagine the sum total of all that. That will be the greatest protection against any aberration of our democratic destiny. Nothing more would be required. In contrast, there will be a concerted effort made to degrade the stock of our humanity, to reduce each one of us to mere ciphers, mere dead counters that can be played with. Attempts would be made to degrade and cheapen our sentiments, to inhibit our sentiments and feelings towards each other by spreading a culture of hate. After all, what does hate do? Hate suppresses the centers of our feeling. We are not allowed to feel for the people who we are required to hate. Hate, which means actually people don't realize when you are made to hate, what happens is you are cauterizing, you are burning up your own emotional sentiments, and you are reducing yourself to a piece of unfeeling wood, dead wood, and it's taking a huge toll on your personality, and is evident on the face of those who allow themselves to be degraded and corrupted in this manner. Once your emotional richness goes, you're a nobody. I don't know if you remember a time in the 70s of the last centuries when people said that the problem of violence in the society could be solved surgically by a surgical process called frontal lobotomy. That is to say, there is a center in the brain where the capacity or proclivity to violence is located. So if you cauterize that part of the brain, then people will become incapable of violence. But that idea was soon decried, denounced, and discarded because scientists who had the good sense to realize what it actually meant began to cry out, saying that if you adopt it as a problem-solving method or a method to create a violence-free society, you'll be destroying human personality altogether, because a human being incapable of passion, incapable of strong feelings, incapable of sentiments, is only a living corpse. And God forbid that in the name of a flourishing democracy, we are reduced to living corpses. It's this danger that we need to be aware of and do everything possible to ward off. So, as it's not as against, complementary to the idea of exercising our democratic franchise, the power of our votes, which I don't want to belittle, I want to counterpoint that with something even more powerful, which is the power of our personality. I dream of an India where 140 crore Indians will have their personalities and their personal potencies and powers developed to the extent that each one of them would command respect rather than contempt, ridicule, and opprobrium, obloquy. That will be the day of days for India. And I really look forward to such a day. And the humble efforts I'm making has this overall sense of purpose that though the scale on which we are operating now is very small, laughably small, it can still begin to make a difference in this direction, in this very direction. For as long as I'm alive and as long as we are together, let's accept this as the very purpose of our life, to enrich the democracy of India by ennobling, empowering human greatness in every citizen. Let this light spread from person to person and embrace the whole of the Indian subcontinent in an embrace of spiritual light. Jai Hind. Mera Bharat Mahan. I believe in it. Mera Bharat Mahan. Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram.